Around the Ozarks is now on your FM radio. Listen to Around the Ozarks mornings with Grace Gooley as I spotlight local people, stories, and podcasts, all while playing the country legends of the 90s and the hit makers of the 2000s. It's on the Ozarks' best country, 105.1 The Bull.
You're listening to The Real Deal Conversations, a podcast designed to encourage, inspire, and equip you by sharing real stories and meaningful conversations that bring real life to the surface. I'm your host, Megan Deal. Let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by Ozark Veterinary Clinic. Okay, so let's segue into emotional flooding, hormones. And because even as an adult, regulating my mood, like my emotions and the hormones being around the time of my period, can be extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. And Daniel and I had this conversation recently, and I said, here's the deal. If we can't regulate our emotions, how are we going to expect them to? And that was kind of with, I'm a fast responder. And so like with that whole thing with the duplexes, I chewed Eli a new one. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how that's so unsafe. Also the anxiety piece, when I am anxious, I tend to not regulate, period. And so I will bite quick. Right. And it's a nervous response. Not okay. Again, the conversation with my husband, if we can't put ourselves in check, why are we expecting them to put themselves in check without grace, you know? Mm-hmm. And so if as adults we can struggle with that, it makes you just put in perspective, how much more grace do they need when they don't even have a fully developed brain? So let's talk about the hormonal influence and the emotional flooding and how their thought process and all of that is dramatically different than ours, and kind of educate us on that.
I'll kind of start with the hormone piece.
Yeah.
So what we know is that hormones directly impact neurotransmitters in your brain, mm-hmm. those chemicals in your brain that affect mood, that affect how you feel, that affect the pleasure that you receive. So mm-hmm. things like serotonin, mm-hmm. dopamine, GABA, norepinephrine, glutamate, those are all neurotransmitters. Mm-hmm. And those are all impacted by the hormones in your body. Mm-hmm. So think about your teenager going through puberty and having this influx of hormones, yeah. or a really unstable level of hormones at times. Mm-hmm. impacting those neurotransmitters. And so, yes, they're going to get moody. Yes, they're going to have outbursts. Yes, they're going to be dysregulated at times. Mm-hmm. They have no control over that.
Yeah.
There is no amount of talking that I can do as a therapist that is going to regulate that for them.
Yeah.
So we can teach them skills.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do as therapists and as parents.
Yeah.
Is make sure we're using those skills or reminding them of those skills or teaching those skills, mm-hmm. so that in those moments that they're feeling dysregulated, that they have something they can lean on.
Mm-hmm. So like breathing techniques, mm-hmm. or, you know, mm-hmm. is that what you're kind
breathing
of...
techniques, even things like in the moment, mm-hmm. like I'm a big person with like panic attacks, mm-hmm. or really big emotions, mm-hmm. get some sour candy.
Okay.
Like sour candy will kind of interrupt that dysregulation in your brain and make you kind of startle, or hold ice cubes in your hand. Like those kind of things regulate your temperature and pull the blood back to where it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
And will kind of stop you in the moment and give you pause.
And I think that's an extremely easy thing to do. Kids love candy, mm-hmm. and ice, it's not a big deal. You just grab the ice. I think that's a very easy, you know.
One thing I think we need to understand too is the serotonin. Mm-hmm. And the serotonin, it's just your ability to feel good, putting it basically, but also to sleep.
Yeah.
And so if they, again, back to technology, back to not sleeping well, they are in a heightened state to begin with. Mm-hmm. Let's throw hormones in there on top of that and everything else that's going on. Mm-hmm. They are a big mess.
Yeah.
And so I think I heard it said that that emotional part, the amygdala of their brain, is like the gas pedal in the car, and it's floored. Mm-hmm. but yet the break is still in development, which is that common sense, that reasoning, that prefrontal cortex. And so if they are not sleeping, they're heightened, they're on, now let's throw hormones in at puberty. We want them to be able to reason on the spot. They can't do that. They can't just calm down on their own and re-regulate. And so that's what parents can do. We can help them learn, and in therapy, this is what we teach. We can help them pause, calm down, go back 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours later, and we teach them how to put those emotions into words. So if they can just tell parents what's wrong, that's a starting point right there. And that, as therapists, we spend an inordinate amount of time helping our young teens learn how to say what's bothering them in words instead of stuffing it. Jenny?
Well, and I think one thing that you were mentioning but did not say is the fact that you go back and you repair. So we, even as parents, have moments where we get too loud or we say something that we don't mean. And so going back and being able to say, you know, I am so sorry that that happened. I was frustrated. I was hurt. This is what I meant to say. Also shows them that when they have big emotions, they say something that they didn't mean, that we've created space for them to come to us and say the same thing. So,
you know, you guys are going to be able to put way better words to this. So I'm going to start it and somebody finish it for me. But I did hear recently from someone that repairing needs to be done quickly for the brain to register it. And their example was, if a dog goes to the bathroom on the carpet, but you don't mention it right away, they're not going to associate it. And then, so if the later you do it, the less association the brain is going to have to that repair or something. I don't know. It was very interesting. And it was something about repairing in the brain, and it needed to be done quickly. Also, with kids and the hormones, I think a big thing too is because they don't know it, I also wonder how much confusion and possible shame and anxiety they have over that. Because I know as an adult, like I've talked to Dr. Arnold just in pregnancy. She is who I see for all my pregnancy dealings and hormones and stuff. And there are times where I'm dealing with thoughts and feelings, all those things from the hormones that freak me out. And I'm an adult. And I need Dr. Arnold to explain, to educate me. I do very well with education. You give me the education piece and I will wind down. But as parents, we don't have the background in education that you guys do for that. And so it's like, how do we educate them? How do we help them understand that they're not going crazy and they're not a bad kid because they just freaked out, you know, especially teen girls around their period are really, and my kids, if you are not helping around the house, if you're not doing, you know, if I tell you to pick up and you're not picking up, that stuff makes me real upset. You getting real heightened, it doesn't make me upset as much. I have a lot of grace for that, just because I look at it as they don't even know what the heck is going on inside them right now. And they're just trying to release whatever that big feeling is, because as adults, we still do the same thing. So it does make me kind of wonder, you know, how parents can help their kids navigate those big emotions and not take it personal. I think a lot of times parents can take it personal, and I think that makes it worse, because now your kid's in trouble because you feel slighted and they didn't even know what the heck they were doing.
Yeah, so I think co-regulation comes first.
Yeah.
Like, you have to co-regulate with your kiddos. I have a 10-year-old. She has big emotions. And my husband sometimes is like, why are you babying her?
Yeah.
She did this, and this, or she exploded. And my response to that is always, she's not calm enough to intervene. Like, what I have to do is co-regulate with her, teach her how to regulate those emotions in the moment, so that then we can educate, or then we can intervene in the proper way for her to take that in. But the co-regulation has to be the first part.
I want to go back to just some things you were talking about. acting quickly so that there's a correlation between what happened and then the learning experience. Unfortunately, with teens, sometimes with our teens, we don't hear about what they've done for weeks.
Yeah.
I think what the individual may have been referring to is punishment or consequences, maybe of children when you say, wait till your father gets home and he's going to punish you, which was very much done back in history. I hope others aren't doing that now because the child at a certain age doesn't understand the spanking they're getting is in response to what they did at 6 o'clock that morning. If that helps a little bit. But I think when we're talking about teenagers, their behaviors can be masked for periods of time. And I think, again, we still can co-regulate. I think even if it's a month later and we hear they did something destructive, I think we treat it the same way. I don't know that time is a factor because, with teenagers, a neighbor may tell you something that they did a month later. You still have to deal with it. So I think maybe what the individual was talking about is if they're younger, let's have some type of a consequence pretty quickly after we discover the behavior so that they can relate it to the mistake.
Yes.
But teens are different.
No, I think I did a very terrible job explaining that. Because what I was referring to was the repair. If we have gone overboard as a parent, if we have done something wrong, if we need to apologize for something. And the example was in reference to actual marriage, but I figured it would be the same for, like if you don't repair right away, it was something about the brain was like, the faster you repair, the safer the brain feels in those situations. And then if you wait too long to repair, then it kind of sticks. The brain kind of looks at it as a negative and then cycles into a negative in the future. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I think it's similar to what you talked about last time with for every negative you need.
Yes.
Yes. For every negative interaction that you have, and this is with anybody, but specifically and especially, I guess, with your children. For every negative interaction you have, it takes 5 positive interactions to make that up. But I don't know that that's on any time frame.
Okay.
Obviously, if we can have multiple positive interactions in a day to make that up, it's going to be less distress on their part. But their teens are old enough to know now that we're having multiple days worth or a week's worth of positive interactions. And we had that negative interaction 8 days ago.
So it's okay if it goes a day and we don't repair it.
I see what you're saying, though, that it's like, for my son, he's going to replay it over and over and over. And I think that might be where there's a little bit of damage, or what I, as a parent, would not want to sit with, is knowing that he is sitting there replaying something that I've said, that it's hurting him, because, he will just cycle with that. So I feel like, again, that's where we need to, when we calm down, make sure that we repair and, showing them, as soon as we can, let's go in when we can sit down and say, I said some things that I didn't mean, or, this went too far, but this is what I was upset about. But trying to catch it as soon as you can, I can see where that would be.
Because there's a lot of times I apologize to the kids. I'm like, man, I exploded. That wasn't about you. That was about me. Please do not accept that as your truth. And I'll tell them that. Don't accept that as your truth. Like that mood was me. But then there's other times, like where with Dr. Arnold, I realized, man, I've been putting things in place that didn't create a safe space for them to make mistakes. And so obviously it took quite some time for me to go back to Eli and be like, I did that wrong. I'm sorry. So.
Can I address something you said earlier?
Yeah.
Good for you, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
We are allowed to anticipate that our children will have household chores, that they will do their homework, and they will pull their weight in the home. I look at those as life skills.
Yeah.
So we're preparing them for their future. So I think saying, I don't have a lot of tolerance for my children not doing some cleaning around the house or contributing to the family why wouldn't that irritate you?
Yeah.
And so our obligation as a parent, I think, is to have fair, age-appropriate chores. I'm going to use the word chores because we're teaching them how to perform in the workplace someday. Also, going back to those boundaries again and the privileges they earn, when they're older, you can say, if you put forth more effort at home and you work overtime and I come home and you've mowed the grass, that is no different than the job I do out in the workplace. If I work overtime, I get more privileges. I get a better paycheck. And so as they're aging, we are allowed to say, hey, this is what I'm expecting of you. And when you do it, let me show you first. This is the quality of my bar. And I would hope that you would do it my way. I'll come back and check. But yes, I think parents can get very frustrated when those basic expectations are not met, but yet we want privileges. And we have to say it doesn't work that way. And let's go back to that term maturity again.
Yeah. I kind of want to go into the what we talked about before. And that is we're talking about emotions. So motivation versus apathy. And we actually, it was very interesting talking a lot about sports and the pressure. And this is what I went home and talked to Daniel, and I said, Daniel, I had no idea. When we're putting all this pressure on them, their brain can only handle so much. And so it was so fascinating to me, especially in this day and age where sports is constant, and the expectation and what you should be doing. So, okay, motivation versus apathy. Let's talk about when our kids are shutting down. And it doesn't just have to be in sports. I just happen to see it a lot because we're a sports family. And so this is where I see it a lot. And where we think that they are no longer living up to their potential. And we're like, why are you just being lazy? That's not the case. So educate us on that, on motivation versus apathy, and where they're shutting down and parents are getting frustrated thinking that their kid's being lazy or just dipping out, not trying their hardest. But that's not the way the brain works.
Many times our children may present as though they're lazy. Maybe some are. But what can happen is when there is a demand placed on them for schoolwork, homework, if they're into sports, a lot of times there's practices every night. There are games starting at 8 o'clock, 8:30 at night, and they are overwhelmed. They freeze. They no longer want to do the sports sometimes, or they're very apathetic. They stop doing their chores. And I'm going to let Dr. Arnold talk about that in a minute. And we really, as parents, need to watch for changes in their behavior. Because if you have a highly motivated child and they take the initiative to be the best, but they end up being on a sports team and they're playing an instrument and they're in this club and they're active in church and they're taking honors classes, how much more can they handle? And so they look lazy, but sometimes they're depressed, anxious, burned out. And again, that overarching word, they're overwhelmed.
I think the other part of that is too that teenagers are in that part of their life where they're trying to figure out who they are, trying to find some identity. And so they're testing out different identities. And so a lot of times they are all into one sport. And then suddenly they're not. And you think, well, you've gotten so good at this. We put so much money into personal training and individualized things and all of this equipment. And they're like, no, I'm done with that. And really, they're just ready to try something different. They're ready to express themselves differently. They are starting to fit that's not my identity anymore. I really want to try this now. And I think I'm guilty of it. There have been times where I'm like, you committed to this, we're following through. And that shows responsibility. And so I do think that is necessary. Like finish out this season or whatever, your team is counting on you. But we have to be open to when they tell us they're done to accepting that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say, even looking at the park by our house on the weekends, there are some kids that start at the age of 3 and we're like, wait till you get till high school. You're going to play football or soccer or all of the things. So by the time they get to 15, 16, 17, they've already been doing the sport for 13 years or more, and they are done with it. Yes.
Yep. And I think too, and this is kind of a self-evaluation after talking to you ladies before about this. I talked to Daniel and I said, I think sometimes we word things in a way that we think we're encouraging them to do better and encouraging them to grow. But the way we word it, if it doesn't end up happening, we've put an expectation on them unknowingly, not on purpose, like, hey, next year is going to be varsity, man. It's going to be varsity, and we're putting this. And in our mind, it's like, oh, that's encouraging. Like, we're encouraging you that's your potential. Like, we see that potential in you. And then if they don't get varsity playing time, and this is my self-evaluation afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder how much he feels like he just failed his parents because he didn't get varsity time. Yeah. When that wasn't even the goal. The goal was just to be like, hey, we see your potential, man. Yeah. Like, you're good. And so we look at it as encouraging, but again, learning, because we're all doing this. We're all in this together. We're all learning through our mistakes together. Oh my gosh. We put an expectation on him and didn't realize it. And the varsity, like, if you don't get those minutes, then how much does he think he just failed his parents? And that's not the case at all.
Not for all parents. I think that there are totally some that, are living through their children, or, these are their big moments and they need to hit it hard and they're not doing good enough. And I mean, you could hear them screaming on the sidelines or the coach is upset. And then you do have this child that is going to school all day. They are taking honors classes. They're in the band. My son was playing saxophone. We were at practice till 8:30 at night, not even eating dinner until close to 9, and he's tired. And then when we get to a game, if he doesn't perform well because of who he is, he's failed his entire team. And that is just a heavy weight for him to carry year after year after season for season.
It's a lot. And I was talking in a conversation with Daniel. I was like, we really need to be careful how we encourage our kids. We need to be careful with our wording and make sure that it's encouraging, and if something doesn't happen, it's not going to hurt them, and again, I think for most parents, but yes, I agree 100%, there are parents living through their kids, most good intentioned parents, again, not trying to do that. But I think for parents listening, especially when you have somebody, and it's not just athletics, it is anything in school, the arts, even academics. Academics, and just knowing, okay, is this encouraging, but is it also putting a weight on them that they have to carry, and just reforming that, rethinking that, and it was after that conversation, and I was like, I wonder how much kids are shutting down because for unnecessary reasons. Do you know what I mean?
Or even showing them that we only love you when you're perfect. Like, that's so hard. And then they're going to take that into their adult life. And that is a lesson we don't want to teach our children, that you're only valuable when you do it right or when you're perfect.
100%.
Hi, this is Dr. Linda Truitt from Ozark Veterinary Clinic in Ozark. We have been taking care of animals from a Yorkie, cows, cats, with a full-service clinic that offers complete surgical services, hospital, boarding, and now we take care of exotic animals from parakeets, snakes, to even flamingos. Ozark Veterinary has been taking care of pets and farm animals for over 50 years. Stop by our animal care center now, specializing in exotic animals on East Highway 14 in Ozark.
I'm going to pick on sports because it floors me watching my grandchildren play goalie in club soccer, or my little youngest grandson playing football. And how the parents act
it's terrible.
When they miss a goal. And so not only have they disappointed themselves, their team, their parents, now the whole crowd is mad at them. And you're going to find some of those kids that say, enough, I can't do this. And it's really sad. I heard too the other day that, refs are quitting right and left because they're so bullied. And I really would love to see parents set examples at some of the sporting events and model good sportsmanship. And maybe we could start a trend. I don't know how to stop that, but I think it's way out of control for these cute little innocent kids that are trying their darndest. And yes, they're too short and a ball went over their head. And these parents are screaming at the children.
Or the coaches.
Or the coaches. Well, that's a whole different subject.
Oh, yeah.
And so in this day and age, I mean, I think the standard is perfection.
It is. My son is he's 3rd grade, and he subbed for a basketball team. And the coach, this is 3rd grade, this is at Fieldhouse. And the coach got frustrated, called a timeout, told the boys to go group huddle over by themselves and figure it out, while he sat on the bench. And I thought, are you freaking kidding me? But that's the mentality of so many of these coaches. I've seen other coaches throw chairs in third grade games.
Clipboard.
It's nuts. Yep. And I told Daniel, well, one, our kid's not going to sub for that team anymore. But I told Daniel, I said, if this ever happens again where we sub for a team and we see this behavior, we have to immediately talk to Ethan afterwards and let him know that's not leadership. Because I don't want, and a lot of these kids are learning leadership from those coaches, and the kids that don't have fathers in their households are learning that from these coaches. There's a lot of that. And it is terrible. I mean, it is, Daniel and I have had these conversations a lot because we are seeing it more and more with coaches. And I don't know what the deal is, if it's ego. I don't know if they're living through these little teams. I don't know, but it's a problem. It's a problem. And these kids, it's part of their development. That's what they see. They're going to think that's what, that's, you can't ask a kid to figure out what's going on in the game and they're in 3rd grade. You have to teach them.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my rant for the day on sports. Sorry.
It's so true.
I know.
What we're talking about too really stems from what age the child is and their retention. And so oftentimes we want to saturate a child with these 4-hour lectures that we think is constructive criticism or discipline. They cannot retain that. We lose them. And so when we have a heightened teen, and they're in trouble and we're going to talk them to death, they have already turned the volume down. They're in their happy place in their brain because they cannot absorb all of that. There's no place to put it because, again, that very logical thinking part of their brain is under construction. And possibly what we're rationalizing with would be stored there.
Yeah.
They just want to get back on their cell phone. They're missing their FOMO is in full blown. They're missing out on their likes. And so we need to understand that when we talk with our children, we have just that very first, that capture them right in the beginning with what we want them to retain, because it's very possible that they can't comprehend a 4-hour or even a 30-minute lecture. So as parents, let's get that point in the very beginning, what we want to say, and then stop.
Yeah.
And then stop.
Yeah.
Because they're not hearing you.
Yeah.
We've lost them.
Yeah. And with teen behavior too, so what would be normal behavior that we need to give grace? And then what would be behavior, and I'm going to give an example, that needs some correction? And what I mean by that is, attitudes. Again, we talked about, okay, attitudes can naturally come just because they're having a big hormone burst, or that's what I call it. And they just don't know. And then what is, no, that's ridiculous. We need to do something. And so, again, it's the boundaries of where do we give grace because they're trying to navigate what's going on inside of them, but then there's also things on purpose. So how would you help a parent navigate consequences versus a giving grace and just saying, let's take a breather,
Yeah. And again, we are all going to get elevated, whether we're parents, whether we're children, as long as it is staying respectful. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to be like, okay, buddy. And I'm going to try to use a mediation skill, which is to try to keep my voice low, to try to help regulate him. Because if I get upset and I'm getting mad, he's going to mirror me. So just trying to stay with it as long as I can. And he never would, but if he would start cursing at me or saying something inappropriate, I'd be like, okay, well, we're going to take a pause. We're done because I'm going to get upset. You're definitely not doing anything constructive right now. So we're just going to stop for a little bit.
Yeah.
So trying to utilize those skills,
Yeah.
but just letting them know that, whenever they are ready and they calm down and maybe, again, go to your room for 30 minutes, go chill out. But I will be here when you're ready to talk again.
Because I think, growing up, there was a lot of consequences, no explanation.
Oh, sure.
And I think it's extremely important for explanation, not just consequences.
Oh, yeah. I even had a teen in my room this morning that was saying, when their parents say you're not allowed to do that and they want to know, well, why? I mean, she's like, I truly want to know why. And they're upset, but she needs to have the reasoning to understand it. I mean, and that is something that my mom and I were just talking about. Like, there are parents that we step in and we do not allow our children to have critical thinking skills. So that is the lawnmower parent, the helicopter parent, which everybody knows the helicopter parent swoops in and handles all of the issues and not allowing the child to sit there and think by themselves, like, how do I handle this? How do I get myself out of this? But the lawnmower parent steps in front of the child, not even allowing there to be any issues because the way is smoothed and, it's cut. There are no rocks. There's no way for them to injure themselves. So there's no way for them to learn how to do critical thinking or get out of an issue by themselves. We don't allow any of that to happen.
I also think some parents, it's lawnmower parenting, and I'm guilty of that in certain aspects. I didn't even know that was a thing. And then when you guys had mentioned it, I was like, oh, I gotta fix some things. But I also think there's ego too. And there's parents who, if you question why I just said not to, and then, and it's ego and it's, well, how dare you? Yes.
Power.
Yes. And then you have these kids who keep repeating the mistakes because they're like, well, I don't even know what the heck I did in the first place. And so I think that's extremely, you know what? Can somebody give me, like, how does that affect a child? When a parent, is it narcissism? Like, what's the deal? What's going on when a parent gives a consequence and doesn't even say why? It's just because, well, I said so.
You'll have to come to my class that I'm teaching, adult children of narcissists. And one side effect of that is perfectionism. And so they don't know that they can make a mistake. And so one of two things, they strive to be the best at everything. If they know they can't be in a certain category, they won't go, or they shut down, or they don't like it. And really, it's fear of failure. So when we have a narcissistic parent with expectations that want a mini-me, they end up with a mini-me many times, and that child acts just like the narcissist. But really, it's very, very detrimental and harmful to the child.
Yeah. And I also wonder, too, when you have a child who continues to get consequences with no explanation, and then they get in trouble for wanting to know, and the parent saying, well, it's because I said so. And then they push to try and find out again. And now the parent's like, well, now you're disrespectful. And then that's another consequence because now they're disrespectful. And I put quotes around disrespectful. I also wonder how much insecurity and rejection they take into their adulthood, navigating relationships in life, in the workplace, dealing with, because again, it's so important. We have like 90% explanation in our house and probably 10% consequence. Like, we're low on the consequence thing. Like, you have to really screw up to get a consequence in our house.
But you're also teaching a child that they can't come to you.
Yeah.
That they can't ask questions. If there's an issue, you're not someone that they can rely on. So sometimes when a child does say why, and not saying that all individuals or parents who say that are narcissists, but sometimes saying because I said so, or because I'm the parent and this, you have to listen to me. they need more than that. They really need to understand you can't go walk down to the Finley River, because if you do, you're going down McCracken Road and you can get hit by a car. From there are very scary people in the world, and who knows, I would hate this, but you could get kidnapped. Oh gosh, Mom and Dad, that makes so much sense. Okay, I won't do it.
Yeah,
and I think, I mean, I'm guilty of occasionally saying because I said so. And I know when I do that, I always put myself in check because I'm like, why did I say that?
Yeah.
And it's usually because it's something I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so then I have to say, what's my priority here?
Yeah.
Like, is this something that I'm just trying to escape the difficulty of? Like, this is going to be a challenge for me, or this is something that I don't really enjoy as much as this other thing that I enjoy more. And if my child really wants to do it, or if my child really needs something from that, then we have to remember that we don't come first.
Yeah.
Like, our kids come first. We need to make sure we're fulfilling their needs, not necessarily their wants. Those we can give a little bit on.
Yeah.
But are we fulfilling their needs? Do they need knowledge in this moment versus us just not liking what the thing is?
Yeah. In every household's different. I mean, there's different behaviors, but our kids will explain. They don't get a lot of consequences. And that's not saying like my kids get to do whatever they want. That's not what I mean. What I'm saying is we do a lot of explaining, and then after the explanation, we just kind of let it go. Because I feel like with an explanation, they're going to be more apt to not do it again than just saying, give me your phone. Like, because to me, it's like, okay, well, I can go without my phone for a day, whatever. But if you give them an explanation, and again, every behavior is different, it tends to work a lot better for our kids not to have repeated actions when we do it like that in our house. But
I just thought of something, and I was thinking about, we show so much grace when a little one is starting to walk, and they're walking and they fall, and then they get back up and they're walking and they fall, they walk, they fall again. Now they walk a little further, and then finally they're mastering walking. That's our teen brain. They're learning how to be themselves. They're learning to be a unique individual, a good citizen someday, a good thinker, a good person with their own identity. So while they're going through these teen years and they slip and fall, instinctually they're going to get back up because they want to still grow and find themselves. What do you think happens to them when they are now forming opinions, which is normal? They're expressing thoughts that are their own. That's normal. We want that. And yet we come along as a parent, put our thumb on that and say, you're wrong. That's bad. So teens sometimes, this is terrible to say, but it's true. Sometimes they do the opposite of what the parent says to do because it's something inside of them that says, I want to do it my way. That is normal. So how do we react to that? Do we totally demolish them and say it's my way or the highway and what you're thinking is absolutely incorrect? What are we teaching them, and how are we allowing them what we've taught them, which is to put your feelings and emotions into words and to talk to us? What are you thinking? And then when they tell us through their actions, we're not okay with it. So now they have disappointed us. That can be very detrimental to their healthy developmental stages.
And I think it's important too, when our kids are giving their, here's the thing. When my kids say things like, well, we should vote for so-and-so. Okay, but why? Because we said that? Like, that's not, no, you need to go do your own research, my friend.
Right.
Like, just because we said that, and I will challenge my kids. I'll be like, why are you saying that? Just don't say that. I mean, yeah, I believe it, but I want you to have your own reasoning. I agree. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's innate in all of us to believe that until you've had experience, that those things happen to other people, whatever those things are, good things, bad things, whatever, happen to other people. They don't happen to me. So I have to try it myself and figure it out. I'm not necessarily going to listen to what you say.
Yeah.
And I think as parents, that scares us. It scares us that our children aren't listening or our children aren't learning from our mistakes, which is what we want. But there is a level of mistakes they have to make and have the natural consequences of that we have to let them have.
Yeah. And be there for them, which is where our conversation came into play of, okay, wait a minute. I've been telling him all this stuff I don't want him to do and why. I never gave him the cushion to go, but if you do it, I'm here for you to walk with you through it. And that's where I had to add that piece in last week and go, I've said all this and to still be their safety. So what? Yes.
I have an example. I remember when my son was in high school and he came home so elated that he had videotaped something for one of his classes and wanted me to watch it. And he was so joy-filled.
Yeah.
And it was him jumping off the Finley Bridge. So my first question was, well, did you check how deep the water was?
Yeah.
And he said, whoops, I didn't. Well, here I am petrified that he could have broken a leg or other things.
Yes.
And yet I didn't want to burst his bubble. So that was a very awkward position for me to be in because I wanted to teach safety, but I also didn't want to ruin the moment.
Yeah.
As parents, we're going to find ourselves in those situations quite often. And I would say lean toward the joy.
Okay.
Embrace the joy.
Yeah.
And maybe the next day say, hey, next time you want to jump off a bridge, why don't you check the depth of the water first?
Yeah.
But I think let's celebrate with them first.
Yeah.
And then teach our lesson tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Is that your brother?
That's my brother.
So end
He
us
lived.
out. End us out, ladies, on we've talked a lot about brain development and teen behavior and where to give grace, but I want to end out also on what are signs that we need to take more serious action, depression, anxiety, behavior. What are the signs that we need to be looking for that it's not just about grace anymore. It's not just about typical mood. Now we need to step in.
When we think about, let's take depression, for example, those symptoms of depression aren't coming and lasting a few hours or a day. They're lasting weeks. Okay, so you're talking about a kid that spends day in and day out in their room with when the curtains closed and the blinds closed, and they're isolating from their friends, they're isolating from you, their family. They're not wanting to engage in things that they used to enjoy. They've just really completely shut down and are completely isolating themselves, but not just for a day or two.
Yeah.
For weeks. When you think about anxiety, yes, they're going to have anxiety in the moment. It is perfectly normal for us to have a level of anxiety. That tells us that something's wrong. That tells us we need to take action. So some anxiety is actually good, despite what lots of people think. It is actually good. But if it goes to extremes with that, if they're worrying about every test for days before the test and or even weeks before the test and are overdoing the studying, they're staying up till 2 a.m. studying every night versus cramming the night before. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of a difference to that. So look for those long-term change in behaviors versus those ups and downs throughout the day or maybe throughout the week. Another major red flag for me is extremely disobedient behavior. So yes, our kids are going to push our boundaries, especially our teenagers. They're supposed to. That's how they start to individuate. But if it's becoming very defiant and oppositional behavior where they're constantly doing everything that you've told them not to, or they're doing things despite having done it once before and learned that you've explained this to them, but they know the consequences and they're continuing to do it, getting themselves into criminal behavior, theft, skipping school, hurting other people, those kind of things. That's what the red flags that go up in my mind.
Yeah, and usually we see individuals, new clients come to our practice, like self-mutilation. So what that would mean is if they are harming themselves, cutting themselves, burning themselves, lack of hygiene, other things like that, we see that. But those are cry for help. So if you are seeing that as a parent, don't ignore it. Take them to the hospital to be evaluated. Make an appointment with a therapist to see what is going on. But definitely we need to get them in.
And that's what I was going to ask you next, was if you have a child who is mentioning suicidal
Ideation.
what are the steps parents need to take? Immediately, how to have that conversation so that we're not, like what needs to happen in the immediate, and then what are the steps that need to be taken?
So for me, I take it very seriously when especially a teenager says something about suicidal ideation, because that experience piece we talked about, they don't have the experience to know they're going to start to feel better. So if they think they're going to feel like this forever and that this is the only way it's going to be, and they're impulsive because the prefrontal cortex hasn't developed, you have a more likelihood of behavior that could end up being very harmful or fatal. So if as a parent, you do a little bit of risk assessment, find out how far that they've thought with that process, but I would take them to be evaluated. Either get them in within the next day or two to a therapist who can appropriately risk assess, or if you are very concerned about it, take them to the hospital, let them assess them there.
I fully agree. And I think one thing a parent can do if they start to see some changes in appetite, friends, dropping out of sports, anything that's different from what you're used to, start a journal. Start keeping a journal because you want a timeline. You want to know, is this just temporary? But when it reaches a point of concern, call Touchstone, call anybody, call your pastor, call someone who knows how to deal with this immediately. I wanted to share that I had a young man, he was in 6th grade, and his mother brought him to me, and he had self-mutilated all over his forearm. I wanted him hospitalized immediately because when you go to the emergency room with your child and they're harming or they're suicidal, the hospital does their own assessment. So it takes a lot of pressure off the parent to decide, are they just wanting attention or is this real? So I really feel like you've got a beautiful opportunity once you get to the emergency room. They have experts there with assessments that determine if they're going to keep your child or not. But I wouldn't want to be self-appointed on that and have something go very wrong and carry that guilt and shame the rest of your life. Also, as Dr. Arnold was saying, we don't need to watch for those changes and be too reactionary. So talking with a professional, we sometimes can talk that child down. When this young man showed me his forearm, I asked him if it was a cry for help, and he said yes. So when I asked his mother to take him to the emergency room, her response was, do I really have to? It's my night, for cards tonight. So that was a rude awakening for me and told me an awful lot about maybe how this young man was feeling and how important he was to his mother.
Yeah.
Okay. So through the years, we do have experience with dealing with very, very extreme cases, but we're trained. We know what to do, so that takes the pressure off the parent to make those types of decisions.
Yeah.
And I would say if we're in a situation where the hospital doesn't keep the kiddo or you can't get there quickly, something for parents to know is put medication up. Don't let them have access to medication. We want to put knives up, weapons up, anything like that. And this again sounds scary, but it's even okay to do a sweep of the room to see if there's anything that they could use or have in there to hurt themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of time I've seen that my female clients are using eyebrow razors
Oh, wow.
to
Yeah.
cut. So just taking those out of the room just to keep them safe until they can be evaluated or until medication and other things can start to help.
Yeah. No, that's all very good to know because I think it's something that is very, you just don't know what to do in the moment. No. So I think it's very good to know those steps and, that direction. But ladies, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. All right. We will talk to y'all in a couple weeks.